Good day to you. This is Galactic from Chico, California on a Sunday, the 24th day of 2025, and over here you see the world's most famous mountain. Everest is related to Antarctica. There is the summit of Everest. That is the summit of Everest at over 8,800 meters for the Chomolungma formation, and right below it is YB. You may have already guessed, yellow band. Why is it called that? It's limestone. It is a sedimentary rock. But limestone is all over the world. It's a very common mineral, rock. Limestone comes from the bottom of ancient oceans. I don't believe anybody has ever challenged that. Well, why is it sitting on top of Everest? Well, the limestone isn't. It's the second step to the top. The top of Everest is the Chomolungma formation. And it certainly does appear that the current continental plate of Africa was moved. I thought you would want to see that there is bottom of the ocean material at the top of the world, as it's called. And how did it get up there? It was plowed up. And these are just gargantuan statements. But we're talking about how the bottom of the ancient ocean got pushed up. Really, 5 miles up, as an American would put it. We know what 5 miles is. That's a hell of a climb, man. There are at least 3 features on the Earth, but I guarantee you, and we will cover the extended list as well, but there are 3 features of the Earth's surface, each of which can be seen from outer space. One of which men have not known about until the last century because it's essentially associated with Antarctica. If you believe the record, you might be religious. That's a fair statement because it's virtually the same thing to believe the record. Well, what does the record say? Why did Abraham believe in a Lord? Well, Abraham was an astronomer, and one night, Abraham is the only man that I know of who has been called the friend of God by God. So that would be Abraham's God. Well, he is considered to be the father of 2 Semitic people. One of them is from Ishmael, and Ishmael has certainly done well. Ishmael has inherited the yoke of Islam, a most noble yoke to inherit. But in the case of the Himalaya mountains, we're quite sure that the ocean floor rose up to about 8,848 meters. First of all, what fossilized them? Well, we think we know that it was at the bottom of a sea. That's really hard to contest, since that's the only possible place they could have. They lived in the sea, there's no question about that. So they were little sea creatures that got buried. A lot of them. All at once. Limestone, if you check what limestone is, it's quite likely to be fossiliferous. Like we started out trying to write our names across the earth or something with gigantic stones. That comet hit when there were people. That comet hit when there were dinosaurs. Now, do we have any records of human encounters with dinosaurs, which would have to come from before the flood? Well, don't you want to know about that too? Well, I would say yes. I would have to say it's complicated. But should it be? I mean, maybe. these philosophical questions, it's like, well, then you have to ask, and now it gets hairy. Why do you study science? Well, what do you mean? Learn to ask a question to a question. Why are you interested in astronomy? Why are you interested in quantum mechanics, numbers, mathematics, formulas? You know, there's a list. This gets really sour because people now have to, you know, prod you. Just figure out who you. They don't know who you are. They really don't recognize a human that's really like this. You actually care about who you are and where you're from, what you're doing, what we're all about. Why is this so amazing? Why is it so complex? What kind of game is this? What are the next moves? How should I deal with all this information? Gee whiz, these glasses are mesmerizing, aren't they? Look at that tick-tock. That reminds me of an old joke, which I won't tell because I ruin every joke I tell. So that was the joke. The connection between the Himalaya Mountains and Antarctica is quite an interesting tale to tell. Because there is a breach where mega tsunamis pounded right through the center of this gigantic mountain range about 12,000 years ago. And we know that now. Actually, Wikipedia has articles on it all over the place. It's like we know, well, that's true. There was a catastrophe. There was a cataclysm. You could use either term, but I think both, and then maybe another word that hasn't been invented. It was a mega, it was a hyper mega hydrolithospheric tidal action in the worst sense of tidal. It's like you had a balloon that's made of jello and you hit it with an RPG. That's a very poor analogy for what actually happened. It is worth trying to envision in some strange morbid way what the Earth underwent when it was struck by a meteor of that size, and I mean that caliber. You'd have to say a left hook from outer space just landed where the Caribbean Sea is today. And if that is Caribbean, I apologize to those who may know, but I find that I alternate between pronunciations. If there's a choice, I'll do either one I want, and I'll be consistent. I'll change like almost every time. 50% you won't know what I'll do next. Like put that period inside the double quotes. I don't care. I might put and then the next paragraph I won't. So there. So there's this giant breach of water that's sloshed, but it's also in the mantle. Above the asthenosphere, which was quite agitated, and we have quite a few volcanoes now, in a ring of fire, but also at the tongue of one of the smallest plates. It's the plate that's formed by that current blasting from the Pacific into the Atlantic, blowing Africa away and blowing India into the butthole of Asia, plowing up the Himalaya Mountains because of a megaton. That's mega, that's million. And mega is too much. It's 1/10 of a mega. It's 100 million megatons. 100 million megatons. The Hiroshima bomb was scaled at kilotons. The largest of the megaton explosions was the Tsar Bomba over Nova Zemlya in 1961, and so the force of the Chicxulub asteroid, when it detonated in what is now the Caribbean Sea, initiated, first of all, the breakdown of the hydrologic system of Earth. Virtually the first thing that happened was the collapse of the infrastructure. And then rather pronounced ripples through the lithosphere, forced buckling in some places, and at least due to the buckling and basically oscillating lithospheric waves, the Earth would have been distorted in terms of its pressure system. The shock wave that would go through the surface, which is a certain kind of shock wave, would have penetrated far. But the deeper shock waves would go farther and would have more global effects, although perhaps slower. But all of these began at once through an incalculably immense explosion, which so upset the hydrologic system of Earth that it forced a breach in the longest mountain range, now correctly, I believe, computed, where there was one continent that's essentially what is now Antarctica and South America today. That was one continent. And it had one mountain range. But that mountain range was split open by the force of the Pacific Ocean itself, which is incalculably large. What settled afterwards is the remains of the hydrologic system, whereby we might be able to compute the amount of surface water that existed before the asteroid strike. I don't have any facts or figures on that, but it's worth thinking about, I would have to offer. As far as what we can see from the geologic record, we do have the circumantarctic current, which shows signs of having undergone an enormous pressure, which cannot even be limited to the water. It was actually more than just the water that moved. And it is known that there was a skating effect. These are called plates today, and the measure of movement between the plates is measured in centimeters a year. So we're looking at something that is slowed to a stop. But that pressure was greater in the past. That has been proved. And what pressure are we talking about? The pressure between the 8 plates. But when you say 8 plates, it turns out there are about a dozen more. And one of them is this plate that is the tongue of the Pacific Ocean sticking into the Atlantic Ocean, where a huge surge of mass, land mass, currently undersea land mass, apparently always undersea land mass, that was driven by megatsunamic pressure, both in the lithosphere and in the hydrosphere, that is, the ocean. And the combined force, which is a combination of interacting forces, the action in the lithosphere and mantle, the seismic waves, the seismic shock waves, of enormous potential, certainly set in motion oscillations at various, you'd have to say, frequencies. These are sound frequencies rather than light frequencies. But there would be a radiative effect of the seismic shock wave, which towards the surface would travel more quickly but dissipate more quickly, but at lower layers, which have a various naming convention throughout scientific history, but we've settled on the lithosphere, which is really the crust. And that more or less floats on is more or less the topsoil of what's underneath, which is generally called, I would say, the mantle. Although these terms are used differently in different contexts, so it's quite historically fluid, we would say. But in any event, you have a very thin layer on top. Underneath that layer are two layers, one of which just gets hotter and hotter. And underneath, we know that it's more towards being molten. In other words, it may be somewhat fluid. And more towards the center of the Earth, it's considered to be more likely to be fluid. But as for the actual depths where these thresholds may be measured, that's a little bit beyond. That's very difficult measurement. It has, of course, been done to the current threshold of technology. What that may be at this moment, I don't keep up with geology that closely, but I put it out there as a perhaps worthy topic of exploration, if you wish. But what we learned is there was a cataclysmic event about 10,000 years ago. Now that just so happens to coincide with the written records of man. So am I being biased? Which supports which? I take the photographs first. It's the photographs that have the proof. The record might as well not exist. That's what science does. No, we're not biased. We're showing you what the record says. And Mount Everest is on our side. If you have Mount Everest on your side, you win. I win. We all win. When we get it right. Because there are repercussions. It could be that these discoveries in science may change your mind about atheism. I think it's time for you to rethink your atheism. Anybody who's an atheist is really out of the picture now. You really don't have anything left to offer. In fact, you can take a hike now. I'll do the talking from now on instead of you, because you don't get it right. And you're irreligious also. So you're double eliminated. If this were double elimination, you're benched. You're gone. You're out of there. You're out of there. You don't talk back to the ump. So we're going to have a debate. And I will have a live stream. This will be set up months in advance. I estimate Christmas. We're going to have a live debate. It's going to be me, that is I. Grammatically correctly, I would say it would be I and myself. We'll be the two combatants. I will play myself over here, and then I'll switch, and I'll be, oh my God, the one who is right. No, we're both right, and we're going to just see who's righter. Does that sound like fun, kids? Here we go. We're ready to sail. All right, that's an hour. Thank you for tuning in. Well, it won't be an hour after I've edited this. I rambled a lot, but we also got a lot done. We now know the connection between so many things now that we didn't know. The connection between the Pacific and India. How the Pacific struck out, bashed its way through and over the Andes mountain range, which is now split off into Antarctica and covered with ice. That tongue of water and silt and whatever else pushed an entire terrestrial plate on now ductile mantle material, and it just slid like one of those crash cars, with it's ringed with a piece of rubber. It's like triangular shaped, and you drive it around in an ellipse, and you try to crash people from behind. I used to try to get in front of everybody and then stop and make them all pile up. Then I'd steam away and come around behind them and bash them all. I thought that was the goal. So I am a gamester. I do like to play games, and that is an hour before editing. So thank you again, those of you who tune in, who would like to get the secrets of the universe. The most important question in the history of mankind is being decided now. We're on the good side. We win. We're the winners. We can prove what we say. That's science. We don't do religion here. But if religion wants to come in, we will also justify your religion. Whatever religion you are, you can bring it forward here. Because there's only one religion. You're either religious the way we are, or you can kiss your religion a Hallmark card. Only Islam is religion. You can take it from Antarctic. We'll be right back. Keep looking up at night. It's going to be a new moon soon.